The 2024 home season is over for the Pittsburgh Pirates. We're going to look back on all of it, answer some questions on today's episode, which is live, and thank all of you for 2024 at PNC Park.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network. My name is Ethan Smith. Find me on Twitter right there at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates for all of your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates. Nick Rauco is here on this live edition of Locked On Pirates, which is, of course, brought to you by the wonderful people over at Booking.com. Make sure if you're going anywhere right now on vacation or anything like that, that you go to Booking.com. Booking.yeah. And the home season is over. The Pittsburgh Pirates, they lose 5-2 to the Milwaukee Brewers today, 74-85. So the Pirates at this point would have to sweep the New York Yankees in New York to have a better record than they did last season, and will have to win the series to do so. And I got a couple of questions here on this live edition, but I also wanted to go ahead and touch on 4 years with this show, folks. I've been the host of the Locked On Pirates now for 4 years. 4 years yesterday. So thank you guys all for that. Thank you guys for being the best damn fans on the Locked On Podcast Network. You guys are amazing. You stick through it just like I do. So I appreciate all of you for sticking around for as long as you've been here. We've built this thing from the ground up, truthfully, and I could not be more thankful for it every single day with what you guys offer me on this platform and being able to answer your questions or voice my frustrations, voice what I'm seeing on a baseball field. So couldn't be more happy. But this is a Q&A style live show. Not really any structure to it all that much. Going to get to some questions. If you're here, make sure you ask some because I will be answering them. But I wanted to start with an interesting one that I posted on Twitter and just said, ask me anything. Didn't matter what it was. It could literally be anything. And Troy Green said, why doesn't baseball enforce a minimum salary cap? If you don't spend to it, you don't receive any money from revenue sharing. Well, the salary cap, salary floor conversation is going to be something until it's something. I mean, that's just truly how it is with how baseball is structured. Is owners like Bob Nutting and owners like John Fisher and owners like in Cincinnati, they're just not forced to spend. Nobody's forcing them to spend the money that they're making. Nobody's forcing them to meet a certain number when it comes to roster construction. Nobody's asking them to go out and trade for a superstar that they'd have to pay a little bit more once they get here. It's just it's just a question that's not being asked of them. They're not being asked to do this. Now, I have been a big component of this for a while, that there needs to be some kind of financial structure to all of this. Yes, you have the CBA. Yes, you have the tax levels to all of this for the bigger teams. Yes, you have revenue sharing. But at the end of the day, I think everybody kind of needs to be on the same playing field. Like, yes, you could look at the postseason this year and see that there's a pretty good mixture of teams that have lower payrolls and teams that have higher payrolls. Like you have the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Mets, the Braves, those teams. Then you have Kansas City. You have Detroit. You have Milwaukee, for instance. Even Arizona's payroll, not all that high. It's a little bit higher because they paid Corbin Carroll, but not a high-spending team either. So you get a good mixture of it, but it doesn't really offer all that much parity as they'd like to think, because you'll hear the whole thing that, oh, we haven't seen a back-to-back World Series champion in so long, but it's pretty much always coming down to the same 6 teams. Nick Rocco says, is there any worry in your eyes with Keller struggling somewhat lately and again today? Not that he played terrible or anything. I thought Mitch was fine today. You would like to have seen him have a better second half. It kind of looked like he was slowing down a little bit as the second half was like just moving along. And when you're having guys like Paul Skeens and Jared Jones, who you want to kind of see get, what's the word here, stretched out and be ready to do this next year, you don't want to see that from a guy in Mitch Keller who you already have seen stretched out. You already have done this song and dance with a guy like Mitch Keller. And Mitch Keller, I mean, this was likely his last start of the year. I mean, you have to assume that. And it wasn't bad. I mean, he had 5 innings pitched. He gave up 3 earned. He still struck out 6. He's going to end the season 11-12, which I think is very interesting. But this is a guy that was an all-star last year. The ERA is still well below his career ERA because of those terrible seasons that he had initially. But 178 innings, a 4.25 ERA, 166 strikeouts. I'd like the whip to be a little bit lower. It's a 1.30. It's not a number you like. And you look at the last 30 games, 4.18 ERA. That's around all of his starts. Even in the last 15, though, a 5.54 ERA. So I don't know if there's much worry with Mitch Keller. Obviously, I think he'll come into next season, do the exact same thing that he's done in the previous 2 with this year and last year, where he's going to get off to that hot start, fight to be an all-star, but you want him to stay on that consistent path of being an all-star. You want him to stick to that path. So we'll see if that's something they can do. We'll see if that's something that Mitch Keller can take into next season as well. And I do think it really is. Daniel Berry Sports Highlights is here. He says, yo, what's up, Daniel? Stephen James says, great channel. Stephen, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Again, ask some questions, guys. I'm here for all the questions today. F. Stover, who's not in here, which actually kind of surprises me, says, who's on first? It's an interesting conversation topic that's going to probably leak into the second part of today's show. First base is interesting because for the second straight year, you've now had Jared Triolo play the position at the end of the season, but he didn't really play it at all the whole year. Rowdy Tellez, we already saw all the drama that came out of that this week. He ain't coming back. Connor Joe, I don't really know how much confidence you have in Connor Joe being the first baseman of the future. So we've already heard rumblings that it could be a guy like Brian Reynolds. And I've talked about it on this show already about Brian Reynolds moving to that position and why it might be good for him moving forward. And it's something that I think we could see. And if they do that, it's just going to create questions in the corner outfield, which I have no gripes with that whatsoever, but it's just going to come with the territory. And that's what you have to expect. Stephen James says, where might we be picking in the draft and what is top priority? I mean, I don't remember all of the new draft rules. I don't remember how the Pirates odds are in this because I know you can only get the first overall pick like a certain amount of times in a certain span. The draft is obviously very hard to talk about at this current moment because you just don't really know what players are going to be risers and fallers as far as things are concerned with college baseball. Now, high school, you're obviously going to have the same kind of thing, but you kind of already have that divide between those guys. I think this is going to be a pretty fun draft class, though, from what I've read. Nick, we'll get to your next question here in just a moment. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB and get $50 instantly when you play $5 because one Caleb Williams passing yard gets you one win on PrizePicks every week in September. So you got one more weekend to do this. Only 1 yard gets you an automatic win every football weekend in September. Folks, that's been weeks of W's that you've been getting all month. So don't miss this deal on PrizePicks because it's gone when September ends. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. And Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in most states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. And folks, welcome back, of course, to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Nick Rucco is back. Rauco. I think it's Rauco, right, Nick? I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. But he says, where do guys like Moretta, Barucki, and Oviedo fit in the future? Does Oviedo push anyone out of the starting pitchers? So Moretta and Barucki are interesting here. Moretta more so because Dauri Moretta is going to be under contract and he'll be coming back off of that Tommy John surgery. So I think he'll be able to slot into a middle relief role, no problem upon coming back. Ryan Barucki, I believe contractually could be gone. And I personally would like to see him come back because I think he's one of the better left-handed options that they have at their disposal. But I don't really know what they're going to do just yet. Oviedo, though, I don't want to just put Johan Oviedo back in as a starter because Johan Oviedo is one of those players that you look at and you say, well, this kid's got stuff. And he played really well last year. Now, missing this season, I think, is going to hurt as far as his development is concerned. But when you take it down to brass tacks, let's say David Bednar has a bad 2025 and you really have to start asking questions about this bullpen. Well, if that happens, then all of a sudden you sit there and you say, well, maybe we move Johan Oviedo to the closer role. Maybe we use him in long relief because that kid has got some stuff, man. He has some real stuff that he can work with. He has some real stuff that the team really likes. And I think that's very important because when you talk about these things, yeah, it'd be easy to just say, yeah, we'll put Oviedo back into the starting role. Well, next season, folks, there's a good chance you see the same starting 5 you saw this season to begin 2025. Injuries pending, of course. You have Paul Skeens, you have Jared Jones, you have Mitch Keller, you have Bailey Falter, and you have Luis Ortiz. None of those guys have done anything really to me to lose their spots in the rotation. So Oviedo would have to do some pretty phenomenal stuff to even get into the starting rotation. And that goes for guys too, like Bubba Chandler, who was named Minor League Player of the Year. That goes for guys like Thomas Harrington, who we speak highly of, Mike Burrows, who we speak highly of. These are guys that are going to have to fight to get into this rotation right now because Bailey Falter you're going to want to keep because he is a left-handed option. Luis Ortiz has very much impressed me this year and will likely be getting his own entire show as far as the player review series is concerned. And then you consider all of this and you say, okay, where does that fit for Oviedo? They'll find something. That's what I would say. They'll find something. They'll figure out something. And I'm going to scroll on Twitter real quick. By the way, folks, you guys are almost at 3,500 followers on Twitter with us right now. So that's really awesome stuff. And again, really appreciate all of you here. 4 years with this. And you look at some things that I've seen on Twitter. Open Creations asked me this actually over the weekend. Said, are you as disappointed as I am on how this team didn't at least clinch a winning season? And then he added, we're literally the Seattle Mariners of the National League. I predicted 83 wins for this team before the season started. And for a large portion of this season, that was looking like a real possibility. I'm talking a real possibility that this team could get to 83 or 84 wins. And with how everything shaked out, that might not even have made the playoffs. The last 2 years, folks, you can really dim it down to 2 stretches over the last 2 years that were detrimental to this team. We go back to 2023. It was losing to the Chicago Cubs and the Milwaukee Brewers 9 times in a row. You go back to this year, it was those games against the NL West and the AL West that they lost 10 in a row. Both of those stretches effectively took them out of playoff contention or even winning season contention. Period. That's just how this went. And you look at that and you start to say, okay, if we could find a way to just remove those stretches, then you're starting to sit pretty. Starting to sit pretty good. And when you look at this team, yes, obviously I'm disappointed in how this season has went overall. Now, I will say the whole first half was fine for the most part. They were having their stretches where they obviously were under 500 for a while, but then got over that and were able to figure it out. And yeah, it's hard not to be disappointed. But it's also, I think, okay to say, yes, it's okay to be disappointed in this team and where they stand right now, but also recognize that next year is going to be better. Bear none. I mean, next year is going to be a better season because you look at what's going on and you say, okay, Paul Skeens is going to be a year more mature and a year better. Jared Jones is going to be a year more mature and more better. Luis Ortiz, more mature, more better. Brian Reynolds is going to come back and hopefully break that jinx of the odd year jinx that he has. O'Neal Cruz is going to get a full season in center field. Nick Gonzalez is going to get a full shot. Isaiah Kiner-Falefa is going to be here for the whole year. Hopefully you see Jack Sawinski and Henry Davis finally take that next step. Then you look at the bullpen. I've said it already. David Bednar is not going to be as bad as he was this year next season. You're still going to have Colin Holderman, who's only going to improve. Then you're talking about those other guys like potentially a Termar Johnson, a Bubba Chandler, a Thomas Harrington. Everything's pointing up, and this is all before, folks, that we see anything in the offseason. Before they potentially go out and get a corner outfielder, before they potentially go get a first baseman, maybe get another starter to truly solidify that rotation. It's a team, and I've said this on the show before. I mean, 2025 to me was always the year. I started saying that around 2022 when we were getting the little breadcrumbs of O'Neal Cruz. Then you have last season where Jared Jones really took off in the minor leagues, and we were anticipating his debut this year. They obviously drafted Paul Skeens, and ever since that moment that they took Paul Skeens, the expectations might have been here. They went all the way up here because that clock is constantly ticking when you have a player like Paul Skeens. It is, and that's just the sad truth of it, is no matter what, that clock is ticking. Because you cannot guarantee that Paul Skeens will be healthy. You cannot guarantee that Paul Skeens will be here for the entirety of his career, which I hope he is, because I'm wearing his jersey right now. And you cannot guarantee that the team around him is going to be healthy all the time. But what you can guarantee is that you at least put a good supporting cast around it, and that you find a way and at least show us that you want to try to get this done. And I think that's the biggest thing that I want to see going into this offseason. And we'll talk about this all on Monday in our season review and throughout all the review stuff. But I just want to see a concerted effort to make it happen. Go get some real players to fill these needs. Go get some real players to make this potentially work. And if it doesn't at that point, so be it. But getting the Rowdy Telezes of the world and the Michael A. Taylors and the Yasmani Grandals of the world isn't going to cut it anymore. So yes, 2024 has been a disappointment. They're likely going to finish the season with the same record they had last year or worse. And at best have one game improvement. It's not good at all. Well, folks, this year was my first season being able to go to PNC Park regularly for home games. We're going to talk about some of the best moments of the home season now that the home finale is done for the Pittsburgh Pirates on the final part of today's episode, Locked On Pirates. Today's episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Make sure to book today on Booking.com on the website or in the Booking.com app, because this episode of Locked On Pirates is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. With hotels, bed and breakfast, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com, you might just find your perfect stay. Maybe it's time to test your baseball competition stadium cuisine. Luckily on Booking.com, you can find a stadium stay that's just right for you. And with Booking.com's wide variety of choice across the U.S., you can go incognito to all your baseball rival cities. I actually used Booking.com to schedule my trip and my stay in Savannah, Georgia next week. So shout out to Booking.com for that, because the right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your baseball rivals. Booking.com. Booking.yeah. And folks, welcome back to the final part of this live edition of Locked On Pirates here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every single day. Pittsburgh Pirates home schedule is over. It is done. We are done and dusted with seeing baseball on PNC Park in 2024. And as mentioned, I got to see them play on opening day for the first time in my life. That was one of the best experiences I ever had, seeing them play on opening day, meeting Gary Morgan for the first time, Michael from around the 412, meeting the Bridge the Bucktober guys, meeting Craig Toth of Bucks in the Basement, meeting Noah Hiles, Jason Mackey, Alex Stumpf, Craig, again from Bucks in the Basement, Jim Stam from the Pirates Fan Forum around the 412, or for the city 412 is his Twitter handle. Obviously Pirates Queen Banshee and those guys, the Renegades of the Rotunda, great freaking people. Obviously, talk about the Bucco Banner guys, met them, got to meet all of the NS9 guys at their tailgate this year. And it was just a season full of fun moments for the Pittsburgh Pirates at home. Obviously, you had Paul Skeens' debut, which was one of the most, if not the most electric atmosphere that the Pirates have had in PNC Park since 2015. You look at even just throughout the season, like even the Philly series was just a electric atmosphere. You couldn't knock it, man. It was one of the best things that you could see at PNC Park for a very long time. And that's what I think we kind of saw this year, is we kind of saw the light shine at the end of the tunnel a little bit, especially at the deadline when they started buying IKF and De La Cruz and Jalen Beeks and those guys. But that's where I think the sentiment of, actually, for me, again, this is my fourth season doing this. For me to be actually able to go to the ballpark, put my eyes on this team, see what's going on, talk to all of Yins about what's going on with this team, it's great. I mean, I really cannot think of any better way to do this, because it's changed my perspective of this team. It's changed my perspective of how big this podcast actually is. And I do want to apologize for the schedule. I understand I missed certain days. I'm dealing with stuff up here that I do want to share with everyone publicly eventually, but I'm just finding the right way to do it. So and that's where thanking all of you means a lot to me, because I never truly knew how big this thing was until I moved up here in April and started coming to Pirates games and started talking to everybody. And I even had employees from the team that work in the ballpark talking to me about what's going on. Is this legit? Is this team in the right direction? Are you enjoying everything? And that's all I can say is thank you. Because this podcast here is nothing if you all don't listen to it, comment, subscribe, rate. It is absolutely nothing if you guys don't do that. Look at Steven here in Baltimore, but would have loved to be there for the last game. That's one thing too, and I'll end the show with this today. This fan base of the three sports professional sports in Pittsburgh, the big three. I know you have the Riverhounds. And shout out to Pittsburgh for getting a women's soccer team. Of the three groups of fans that are in Pittsburgh, Steelers, Penguins, Pirates. Folks, if you were at the ballpark this year at any point when they were seemingly in it or right outside of the wild card race in June, July, and August, that place was buzzing. People want a winner in this city again so bad when it comes to baseball. And really just want a winner again, period. But baseball specifically, they want a winner. They want to see this team rise to new heights. They want to see this team continue to get better. They want to see this team figure it out and get back to the postseason for the first time in almost a decade. They want that. Hopefully the Pirates find a way in the offseason to do it. But again, the home finale was today. Thank you all that introduced me to life at PNC Park, kind of on a regular basis. Shout out to you. If you were there and said anything to me, comment and let me know how everything went with meeting me this year. Give me some suggestions, too, on some things you might want to see throughout the offseason. Find the show on YouTube and all of your audio platforms. Follow me right there on Twitter at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates. And until tomorrow, folks, see you on the flip side.